All right. Hey, everybody. It's good to be with you, man. We're talking about this really cool project. I'm really glad that you're hanging around to hear about this. A couple things before we get in. Can we start just with a word of prayer, and then we'll get into the logistics and start answering some questions. But let's pray. God, we, in some places in our church history, are springing from a time where being a Christian is making sure that your ideas are right, but where your actions don't maybe matter as much. And we just want to be a people that what we believe and what we do matter. And we think that they matter to you. And so as we consider not just what the good idea of justice is, but the good practice of justice, in the way where we have an opportunity with a lot of land to practice justice in a good way, we just continue to ask that in this time, in the meetings and the conversations that will continue to roll from this time, that you would continue to spark divine creativity, incredible questions and friendships and relationships that ultimately lead to finding the people that we will need to accomplish whatever it is that you want to accomplish here. And as we look forward, we certainly don't want to be a people who forget to look back. And you have been so faithful to this church community. You've been faithful to us in the purchasing of this land, in surviving highs and lows, and in all of that. We're just eager to see what more is in store that we get to be a part of. Thanks for a past that we get to stand on. We pray for clarity in this time. We pray for delight in this time, and that as we all leave here, that there's not just a sense of buildings and structures, but a sense of worship. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right, for those of you that own a smartphone, I'm going to ask you to pull that sucker out, and you can head to dc2.me or discovery-church.org. And as you do, I'm ultimately guiding you to the answers to all the questions. So this will really help for the test that we're going to have at the very end of this presentation for you. But if you find that main home page, there is a button on there, and you can see this on the screen that just says affordable housing. If you click on that button, that will take you to this page. And at the very bottom, if you scroll all the way down, you'll find the place where you can submit questions, and then at the very bottom, answers to those questions. So to be clear on the front end, before we get into our time, we received questions that were from developers and potential developer types. We received questions from the congregation. In the interest of answering those and making sure that the developers were getting what they needed, there were some questions that came from the congregation that, with all honor, are really good questions, but just questions that a developer would be like, that's weird that you're telling us an answer to a question that we're not asking. And so we took the liberty of separating them out. And so today we'll be answering the questions under the button answers to congregational questions. But if you're like tooth sweet charging into this project, like I want to know all the things that there are to know, after this meeting, it might be really fun for you to click into the answers to the developers' questions and just see what developers are asking as they're looking at the same RFP that you're looking at. So if you will click on that answers to congregational questions, that will bring up this page for you, and we will be working off of that today. I am excited to show you the faces of the team, some of the team that's been behind this. Not pictured here are Sharon Vickers, who's been a part of this project for the last couple years, as well as Nancy Movick. Dave Little is currently still on his way back from a big trip. So those three are not here today. Who you have here, and why don't we, if we can just pass the mic around, will you just say your name and how you're connected here at Discovery, and then also to the land use team?
Hello, I'm Linnea Stewart. I was with Zach a couple weeks ago introducing the project. I've been operating as the project manager for our group. I've been coming to Discovery since 2021.
Hello, everyone. My name's Steve Williams. My wife, Kathy, and I have been coming to Discovery since 2013, so about 12 years, and been a member of the Land Use Committee since it started in, late 2022? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Alina Rich. I just joined the land use team as of last month, so I'm the newbie on this team, but been going to Discovery since 2012.
Oh yeah, I'll keep this.
Hi everyone, I'm Cody Ratney. I technically have been on some form of the land use committee for nearing 10 years now. through many iterations, and I was also a former elder, and I volunteer in the AV group. And so I'm also a civil engineer by trade, and so that's how I came to be on this group, to help kind of guide and help with that.
Hi everyone, my name's Amanda Ropek, and I work at the Broomfield Housing Alliance, which is the housing authority that serves the city and county of Broomfield. And I've been working with this team on this project since about mid-2023, I think. And we worked really hard to bring, some of you might remember 2 years ago, we did a design charrette where we had kind of envisioned what could happen here on this site. And so been with this team since that.
I'm Steve, and I'm the, what would you call me, the quant nerd, the PhD real estate guy, and I'm just here to make sure that you know, this project is sound. It's supported by rational thinking, creative thinking as well. But I'm kind of the I don't know, Dr. Doom is what they call me in my career. So I'm not a doom guy, but you know, I'm just here to just kind of what's that?
We'll call you Doctor of Real Estate and Economics. Yeah, we'll call you that right here. Okay, so here is how we would love to structure our time. There were several questions that came in. We whittled that list down, looking at duplicates, looking at things that there's some conversations that we had offline. And so what remains is 17 questions that we would like to answer for you today. We're committed to not going more than an hour in this meeting. I would say right out of the gate, if you're like, we're at minute 30, I am good to go. You do not need to feel bad about standing up and going on a long bathroom break at your house for the rest of the week. With that, I also want to be clear, as we're answering these questions, we had said this last time, these are dreams, these are designs. These are not plans, and the semantics around this get really weird. But I do want to be clear that what you're looking at in what we've designed so far and what we're answering, there are an awful lot of things that we just don't know, and that is a part of this process. And so where we stand right now as we're waiting for the RFP proposals to officially come in is that we'll be receiving from developers, here's how we would like to go about pursuing the project that you guys have designed so far. But there will be lots of changes that they'll make. There'll be lots of new ideas that they'll be bringing. And so in all of these conversations, just hold loosely pictures, ideas, answers that you're getting, particularly the ones that we're like, we're not totally sure how that will go. And then for the format, we'll go through, we've kind of selected based off of whose area of specialty might that question be. That person on this panel will be answering that. There may be some time if there's another member of the panel that was like, oh, let me weigh in on just one other aspect of that. But we'll try and move through these 17 questions. And then once we get through those, did want to create some time for some live Q&A, that if there's a question of follow-up or clarity that you wanted to have based off of something that you're hearing up here, that we can do that. Panelists, if you can just be sure as you're answering the question to let everybody in the room know what question letter you're answering. Everything that you will find through the website that's on your phones right now in the crowd is lettered question A. We will be answering those questions out of order. So if you can make sure you're letting folks know which one we're addressing, that would be great. And then I did want to highlight one more time, particularly Amanda Ropek. Amanda has been an indispensable part of this team, and the work that she does with the Broomfield Housing Alliance in our community spans well beyond the work that's happening here at Discovery. But they're incredible people, and the work that they're about is absolutely lovely. But it's the amount of time and the amount of passion and the amount of network and connections and soundboard that Amanda has brought to us that has been such a gift. Because most of us on this panel, most of us in this church, we are not affordable housing experts, and she is, and it's really helpful. So to get us kicked off with our questions, we're going to start with you, Amanda.
Thanks, guys. So the first question I'll be going over is question F on the rundown. So that question is, like, what is affordable housing? What makes these housing units affordable? And so for the purposes of this RFP, affordable housing really is meant to mean a community where the units will be rented to households with incomes between 30 and 80% of the area median income. And that area median income is dictated by the federal government, by the state government, and it's issued each year and updated each year for each community across the state. So like our AMI is different than Westminster, than Broomfield, or than Boulder. Sorry. Oh gosh, that's louder. Yeah, okay. So that's really what affordable housing is. It's just income restricted housing. Let's see. Does this impact, like how does affordable housing get paid for? How do you pay for the construction? There's a lot of just general financing in affordable housing, but some of the other mechanisms include state funding, federal funding, local dollars, and most importantly probably is the state low-income housing tax credit. These are tax credits issued by the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. They're issued each year in multiple rounds each year to affordable housing projects that a team at the state, they go through rounds every year and they pick projects that are really well thought through, really well put together, offer deep affordability in communities that really need it. And so those are kind of the mechanisms that come together to allow a project to offer more affordable rents, but also still be built with the same high quality standards that any other market rate unit would be built.
And Amanda, can you just speak to, like when we say 60 to 80% AMI, what types of jobs are we talking about in our community that are pulling a wage somewhere in that range?
Yeah, so just to give a general number, so 60% AMI for a family of 4, it's definitely a range and it's based on how many household members there are. 60% AMI for a family of 4 is about $96,000 a year, pre-tax, right? So these families are often teachers, firefighters, first responders, baristas, your grocery store workers, just basically people you would come across every day in your community that serve your community. So yeah, I mean, this really, affordable housing really is meant for the community. Yeah.
And then I think these first couple questions are really important for us, mainly because it's not the water that most of us swim in. When we're talking about the LIHTC and the financing route, can you speak to some of the timeline and the competitiveness that also involves?
Yeah, so there are several different rounds of tax credits. We call them tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC, you might hear someone say. That's the acronym. There are 2 major rounds every year, and those rounds are often double subscribed every year. A lot of applications go in, and about only half of the projects get selected and financed. And if you don't get your project financed, you wait till the next year and you resubmit. It can take, I mean, it's possible to get it on your first submission. Sometimes it can take 2 or 3 years to get your project awarded tax credits. And so they are highly competitive. Different tax credit rounds are geared toward different size projects. So for smaller projects, there's a 9% round in early February. For larger projects like 90 to 120 units, maybe more, that tax credit round is in August every year. So it's only once a year you'd be able to go in for these really competitive financing opportunities, unfortunately.
And any more than moving to question A, anything more that you'd want to add in that area?
No, I mean, I would just say afterward, if you have any more questions about tax credits, happy to go into that. There's a whole lot that goes into affordable housing financing and tax credit financing that I could bore you guys with for like an hour, honestly. So if you want to learn more, just find me afterwards. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. All right, Cody. Question N.
Sure. And this one has to do with, I believe the heart of it is really, what are we going to be held to, and what is Broomfield going to want done on 144th? As you guys know, they just did the whole 144th right-of-way, and they renovated all of that. If you would have asked me before that happened, I would say all of that stuff that happened, we would have had to pay for, or whoever the developer is coming in would have had to pay for that. I think the really good news is that that's been done. It doesn't mean that we won't have to do more, and we haven't gone to talk to Broomfield yet, but I would assume there will be some pieces that we will have to have that Broomfield's going to ask for as we go through the development process. But I think those are greatly reduced by what has already happened out there. Yeah, then question O, so just the next one down, and this one's really asking about what's part of the project and has the city agreed to maintenance and all of those kind of things, the roads within the project. And I would say, one, we don't know yet because we haven't really talked to them, but I think the next piece is, so typically that's all done through the development review process, and you really have both the negotiation and the requirements coming to you from Broomfield and with Broomfield. So typically roads within a private development are not maintained or taken care of by the city and county of Broomfield, but 144th likely would be. And so I think there's a lot of pieces that are nuances on that. And if you guys have more questions, yeah, come talk to me. But I would say there will be utilities as part of this project. There will be roads. We've got to figure all that out when we get a developer, and we'll have those negotiations with the Broomfield staff. The next one is Q, so just a couple more down. That is asking about the ditch that runs through the property, and it's actually not a ditch.
You may need to tell people what you're talking about. 'Cause
Yeah.
some people are, what do you?
Yeah. So behind the gravel parking lot, on the north side of the gravel parking lot, if you've parked over there or driven past it, there's a kind of a berm there, which is dirt kind of bermed up, and then behind it is kind of a low area, and then the water flows over in that zone. That water is actually allowing water from our property here where the church sits, and also the parking lot. All of that runoff from when it rains, all of that goes into the storm sewer and then goes over there and is actually treated. So sediment comes out, all the fun things that, dirt from your car, any oil and things like that, all kind of gets filtered out in that pond, which is what it is. And then it eventually goes and then runs over to Zunai, and then down Zunai, and then goes into the inlet over there by the inlet. So it's actually not a ditch. It's conveying our water from our site here. The developer is going to have to decide, do I want to keep that in its current location? And it does have an easement, so there's some legal pieces of it. They're going to have to decide if it's worth keeping that in that location or if they want to relocate it. And if they do, then they'll have to keep that amount of water that comes over there and plan for it in a future location. They could relocate it, they could leave it. It's really up to them. And we'll be part of that negotiation, I would assume.
And for the non-civil engineers in the room, water detention is not something you can not do. Is this correct?
Yeah, both our project, which is the church, I'll say the western parcel, and that new parcel on the east side, both developments have to deal with stormwater, both from a water quality side, but also from a detention standpoint. So what I talked about the cleaning of the water, but it also deals with not burdening downstream users with increasing our imperviousness here. So that's like your paving and your buildings and things like that. That increases the amount of water that comes off of your site in a rain event. And so that is causing a burden downstream. So we have to provide that detention on site to prevent that from hurting someone downstream. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, yes. What type of businesses does the current zoning allow? So one is that we're currently in an A1 zoning district, which is really agricultural. So if you really look to the north of us, it's very large lots with, a single family home or a small farm or kind of an agricultural use. That's really what that kind of A1 zone is kind of looks like. But what's super fun is that we have additional zoning on our property, which includes both an overlay district because we're right in between. As you drive on 144th, you'll really see this. You see the very rural to the north, and you see the very residential to the south. We're in an overlay district that essentially says you are transitioning from a higher density residential to a lower density agricultural use. You need to figure out a different use of this, the way that you would implement that zoning. So we have that. And then also when Discovery came through with the church building, we actually did a PUD as part of ours, which stand for Planned Unit Development. What really that means is that we think of this property, the church property, the west parcel and the east parcel as one thing. And we have some standards that we think should be applied to these two properties. And that's really what a PUD is saying, is like, there's something happening here. They should all talk to each other and not be in conflict. And that's really what the PUD is. Now we do guess, and we don't know this yet, that there will probably be a rezoning effort that would happen, or part of the development review process would change the zoning from an A1 to something, or they would modify the PUD to accommodate a much like a higher density residential use on the west or on the east parcel. So I think that may
And that
be
was
all of
question
them.
C for those that are
Oh
following
yeah,
along.
sorry, I totally missed that one.
All right, we are going to jump to question L. This has to do with the mineral rights on our property. And currently, Discovery Church owns the mineral rights. We do not have plans to sell, to relinquish those rights on this property. They gave me a softball question, so that was kind of nice. Yeah. And then we're going to jump down to question P. Have renewable energy components been incorporated into the current thinking? It is a little early to be able, in our project, to determine whether renewable energy components will be incorporated, but they will be part of the consideration and explored when we start with the selected developer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well done. All right, question I. Will there be a management company involved? Are they reputable? What's the term of their contract? Can they be fired and replaced if not performing? Great question. So this is all part of what we'll be entering into as we're kind of entering the dating phase with these RFPs and these developers, as they're coming back to us and going, here's how we have taken your designs, we've added now our own, here's what we think we can do. Part of our questions in that interview process will be, well, what does the long-term management of these of this property now look like? Some of the folks that we've talked with already so far have said, well, we have in-house things that we already do. Others have said, yeah, we'd be working with a third party. So really the answer to this question is, we don't know, but we're also not going to be hyper involved with the choosing and the hiring and the firing. All of that is intended to kind of be in the package deal that this developer is determining. So our hard work comes in the interview process of picking a developer that their plan for the property management of the ongoing facilities, that is a plan and a property management idea company that we feel like we can really get on board with long term. And then I'll jump to question J. What are Discovery's responsibilities after the property is turned over for development? Anything that could come back on us if construction fails to complete for any reason, anything that can come back on us 25 to 50 years down the road. Man, fantastic questions. Let me read part of this response just verbatim. So for those of you that are following along, again, question J. Our role is to provide the land and support the project's mission, while the selected developer will be fully responsible for the development, construction, and ongoing property management. To minimize our risk, we'll be taking extra care to select a reputable developer with a proven track record of successfully completing similar projects. This, I think I would unabashedly say, this is why it's helpful to have a Hulk in the form of Steve and Laposa on your team, somebody who has an incredible background and experience in understanding what's the financial viability of a real estate or a development or a builder. And this is what Steve does professionally, and so to have him on the team is a huge gift. What keeps us from having issues long down the road? I mean, you can always choose one of the world's best option as a developer, and then anything can happen. I mean, COVID taught us that you could have really healthy companies that can't survive, things like that. We're taking on a degree of risk that is like a welcome to life degree of risk, and so I would ask us to keep that in mind as we go. And there are so many factors that are involved here long term that will just be playing out as they arise. But the intent, similar to that first question, is this is all part of our due diligence as we're interviewing developers. All right, and then question D, will Discovery have any control over the types of businesses leasing space? Great question. So right now, you can see on the drawing behind me, the bottom down here, right now what we have is that these are commercial spaces, so I believe that this is what this question is getting at. We have control over those. So I didn't have a seminary class that taught me about real estate law, but I've been learning a lot the last few years, and one thing I've learned is there's deed restrictions. And so what we'll be doing as we're working with developers is determining as best we can what deed restrictions are involved as we're building out this property, and so that if somebody down the road comes along and says, I'd really love to build a simultaneous strip club and marijuana joint, we're like, oh, actually you can't do that here because we had the foresight early on that there are certain types of businesses that just don't fit with the type of property that's here. The flip side of that question is also, what would we love to see? Again, I would encourage us, these are our designs, these are not official plans. So this could be something that the developer totally does away with these commercial spaces. But also, just to dream at this a little bit, if these commercial spaces were serving not just the residents that live just north of here, but if they're serving the residents that live well north and the residents in McKay Landing, what about pediatric dentistry? What about different child care facility? There's been more talk of further retirement care facilities. There's a lot of different options that can go in here, and so many of those options at the end of the day fundamentally come down to what vision is the developer bringing to the table as a vision that we feel like we can get on with it. So what protects us from the types of businesses, it will be deed restrictions. There's still an awful lot of flexibility and movement that can happen with that lower portion of the property. You're up, buddy.
Okay, I'm going to take on questions B and M, which are pretty related. Question B is, what is the current vacancy rate for a commercial property in our area? We don't know. Having worked with this type of data for about 35 years, I know the data is out there, but when you say commercial, that could mean everything from hotels to retail, it could be, warehouses. We don't know, and I will make sure that the developer we choose has access to this kind of data so we can at least challenge them or support any ideas they have based upon empirical data. That is going to be extremely important for my vote, at least for sure. The question M says, what kind of commercial entities are expected? When I first saw this the drawing, was this done by the students? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was done by the students? This one is actually more kind of a verification feasibility from students. So is it a students or not? Our office. Okay. Okay, well then I better be nice. That's not going to work. That's all I can say about that. One of the potential developers, I went and saw a project they're currently doing, and they actually put in a community center for training for the people in the neighborhoods. Now that's something that I'm sure would work, but who knows what's happened. Right now, there's a lot of office vacancy rates, so why would you do an office unless it's a destination-oriented office like a dentistry or daycare? But I'm not sure you could even put a daycare center on there. It's I don't know, there's too small. So basically, whatever it is, it's got to have some market analysis and due diligence to say, here's what we think is happening today, and here's what we think could happen for the next 10 years as well. I mean, I've got a 35-year background in real estate cycle forecasting for institutionals and REITs and private developers. So this is something that I'll be taking a good look at and challenging any potential ideas. So I will put on my Dr. Doom hat. Well, can I put on, what I'm going to do is switch out my PhD for an MD and give them all a colonoscopy. Is that all right? Okay.
There you go. We won't let him do that.
I just embarrassed my wife.
All right. So I'm going to talk about question E. I'll just read it. I read through the RFP and noticed it mentioned having services for IDD and for those living in the affordable housing. Did I miss seeing where those services would be housed, like an office? Are you planning to use some of the commercial space for this, or are there other ideas? So I'll start by saying that I think what we tried to do in our RFP is cast our mission, vision, and values of what we're trying to see. And we're trying to develop an intergenerational community that has a wide variety, serves a wide variety of needs. IDD, affordable, and also senior potentially. Might be others. Depends on what developers want to try to bring to us. Where this service goes and what the services are is really dependent on what the community ultimately looks like and what the mix of needs is. So we've had some ideas that came out of the charrette. Those are listed in some of the documentation that's in the RFP, but nothing is really set in concrete yet. And we're just going to work with the developers to figure out what the right mix is and where it would go. Second one, question H. Will the units be rented or owned? If rented, who is responsible for the upkeep, warranty issues, maintenance, landscape, paint, clearing walks of snow, elderly and disabled especially, playground maintenance, all of those things that it takes to maintain the property? First of all, they plan to be rental units, okay? And we will not, the developers will turn this over to a management company to do all this, right? So the church is not gonna be really involved in maintaining or managing the properties. There'll be a property manager for all of this. All of that stuff will be responsibility of the management company or maybe more than one management company. So that's where that all falls in. The church is essentially turned this over to a management company to run.
You got
One more.
I do. Okay, similarly, who actually owns the property after it is released for development? Who pays the property taxes? Great question, right? We've had a lot of discussion about that. Dr. Laposa is 99.999% certain the property will need to be sold, but we are open to other options. So we don't know yet, but there will be an ownership, and depending on how that ownership happens, we will structure some kind of deed restrictions, lease restrictions, maybe HOAs, something like that to ensure that what gets put on there meets our mission, vision, and values. Is that it?
Yeah, you're next. Thanks. This is question G. Hoping that affordable housing doesn't mean cheap construction. This only leads to higher warranty cost and additional maintenance. So I'll read the answer. When we refer to affordable housing, we are talking about housing that is financially accessible, not housing that is cheaply built. Experienced developers across the state know how to bring together the right mix of financing, such as tax credits, grants, and other subsidies to deliver safe, high quality, and well-designed communities. The goal is to provide top-notch housing that meets the needs of residents while remaining affordable, ensuring both durability and livability for the long term. So what I can add to that is the entire reason why this group exists is because we have such a high level of expectation and hope to make this a community that not only serves kind of those in need, but also is beautiful and really upholds the standards that I believe we all want to have in our lives and the way that we live in our life. So this is why our group exists. We want to make sure that it's not something that doesn't deserve love and attention.
Cool. All right, and with that, there are 17 questions with 17 of the best answers we could offer back. And so with the remaining time, would love to kind of now engage some live Q&A. So we are being recorded, and so what we'll do is as you share from the crowd your question, I'll repeat it, and then we'll kind of function as our MC, and we'll kind of dish this question out to the folks on the panel who that's their area of expertise. So curious if there's a brave soul that might get us started. What questions are burning in your minds as you're hearing all of this presentation? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm trying to orient myself to this map above, which I understand can change many, many, many times down the road. But as I see it, the right boundary is Zuni Street, and the bottom boundary is 144,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then I see that at this point in the design process, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that are potentially affordable housing. The bottom right corner is the commercial portion. On the left, I see the parking lot and the barn, and then what are the two other things?
Okay, so let me summarize a whole bunch of what you just said. So for the folks at home, the bottom of this particular picture on the screen behind me is 144th. Your right side will be Zuni Street. So yes, you are looking at 7 structures that are affordable housing, plus the whole bottom strip that right now is kind of loosely held as commercial space. And then your question is leading towards, and I think you're probably headed towards more, Kathy. What are some of these other things that are drawn on the eastern parcel? And so you'll see there's the barn as it is right now. We're still holding loosely the conceptual designs that we've had as a church for a building that we've called the Silo. This is a Family and Children Ministries building. The other little box, I mean, that big circle that's there right now is a planned lawn. Thanks, Cody. That structure that is the square box on the far end of that is also a very loosely held outdoor chapel that we thought would be really cool to build out there. That could be used for anything from patio parties to outdoor concerts to weddings to whatever you use outdoor venues for. We've also chuckled as a team that a lot of our work, we started in the charrette a couple of years ago looking at the entire property and putting buildings all over the place and how integrated can the church be in just putting homes everywhere. And when it comes down to zoning and all that kind of stuff, it immediately made more sense to put everything on the eastern parcel. So that's where all of our work has gone. So we've often chuckled at how much white there is on the western parcel. We've got a lot more work to do there, but we're going to try and get this eastern parcel going. So yeah, that's that orientation. Yeah. Do you have more that you wanted to ask about any of that? Yeah, great question. Yeah, that Cody's circling, that is the existing parking, and then you can kind of see it's kind of ghosted out up there, but that would be essentially taking the parking from our current eastern lot, the gravel lot, and just extending that out there, so we'll retain those same amount of spots. Yeah. Yeah.
Given our financial situation, if we sell that eastern parcel, could that have a positive influence on our expenses?
Yeah, that's a great question. Adrian asked if we can sell this parcel, given our current financial position as a church, does that help kind of a net benefit to the church at all? Probably the best person on the stage, Adrian, I'd love to introduce you to Dr. Steve Laposa. I think he'd be the best one to answer that.
What I've done is before we sell that parcel, and we've talked to Solomon, and they said they're not going to take a second position. If we're going to do something, they want to pay it off. So the first thing we're going to have to do is get an appraisal done by a licensed appraiser, someone who is a commercially licensed, who has church experience, valuations. Because to value a hotel or an office is one thing, to value a church property, I know is very, very specific type of qualifications. So what we have right now is about a $3.6 million debt on everything. And what we've been playing around with, and Amanda's kind of helped throw out a number, which I don't believe either, so. Anyway, so what would happen, the net result is if we sell that land, it could potentially save us $10,000 to $15,000 a month. So that's good news. But if we get Amanda's number, are you getting a cut of this? No,
Think of that.
I mean, we've looked at land sales up and down, in Adams County, well, Broomfield County and Weld County even. So we've got that kind of data already. So we don't really know how much it's going to be appraised at, but I mean, based on my experience, the appraised value is going to be much greater. So we have to do the whole appraisal. We have to allocate a certain portion to the eastern parcel that Solomon says yes, that they agree with that number too. And then I'm sure that number is going to be much higher than the debt allocated to the eastern parcel. But at that point in time, I think I'm going to talk to my old buddy Blake and say, let's go through these numbers. So.
So I'll just add to that. Selling the property is the most straightforward, most likely correct way to go. The reason why there's still a question about some alternative to just selling it is because once you sell the lot, there is a little bit less agency for our voices to be heard at the table, just to say. So of course, the advantages of selling the lot and just, the straightforward kind of interaction of doing that is probably the right answer. There would be this idea of deed restrictions to kind of try to bridge our goals into that process. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Any more follow-up on that? Okay, great. Yes, Blake.
Less of a question, more of a, can we plan for the future? So it'd be nice to get a little something from the city to say, oh, your development is a church.
So I think we've had some pretty preliminary.
Restate it.
Yes. Oh, sorry. So Blake, his observation was, or question was, do you think the city and county of Broomfield would have any leniency towards the church doing affordable housing, and what kind of, both the code, I will say, but also the zoning that's on this property? Is that okay?
On our side,
Oh,
when we go to build new stuff, because we're a church and we don't actually fall under the code overlay, and yet they like to say we are.
and so Blake's actually talking about the western parcel where the church currently sits, and I would say that they've been pretty lenient in terms of how they interpret the code for our property because it's part of a PUD. What was approved previously, they've been looking at that as kind of their guiding concept rather than actually holding us to the code every time. And so we've been going through, I think it's called a special use review, if I'm remembering correctly. Don't quote me on that one, but I think that's what we went through for the silo project. And so that was actually much more lenient than the code overlay was. I think the good news is that from what I can tell from our preliminary talks with a few people at Broomfield is that they don't love the toad. And so I think there is some availability for us to kind of push on that, not only as a church, but I think also on the affordability side on the eastern parcel, that it does allow us to look at things a little differently. And I think with BHA being with us, that also helps that conversation. So I think there is some leniency on that, but time will tell. We find these things out and we talk to people and then they move on and then we have a new conversation. So all those things always change every time you have a conversation with any city or municipality.
That's a great question. Do we have any feel for what our neighbors think about this? Real quick, some of our neighbors are watching this right now. we're delighted to get to be your neighbors, and we're excited to bring this project. I do think, Amanda, you might be a helpful person to answer, maybe not this particular question, but the general idea. I think so. Let me speak to the direct answer, and then feel free to add in what needs to be added. So we absolutely know how the temperature in the room was feeling with the Habitat for Humanity project and some of the work that it took to get there. There's a sort of benefit and sort of not now that for the neighbors who have been around for a long time, they've been aware of that, and now they've just kind of been waiting, and depending on how much they've been checking in with Discovery, and we've had some call just to see, like, is that Habitat thing still happening? Some still are waiting for that, and then there's also new neighbors that have moved in and they have no idea. So up until this point, we've been really careful not to do a ton of work and outreach to them, only because there's not a lot that we know. Like even in this conversation, the amount of questions asked, we're like, that depends on the developer. How much conversation do you want to generate with your neighbors that you're only going to get so many interactions when most of your answers at this stage are, I don't know, or we're not sure what's happening. And so we do know, and Amanda's been brilliant at beating the war drum of we have to, in short order, as soon as we have something that we feel like we can share, we have to make sure that we're inviting them into this process and being really clear. So what more would you add to that?
Yeah, I would say one thing that we've been learning over the past few years is how important that neighborhood engagement is in these processes. And so, like Zach said, we encourage that to start as early as possible. And I think for the purposes of the RFP, one of the things we'll be looking at is, like, does the future developer have experience working in communities on projects like this, and what is their neighborhood engagement plan? Because that is vital to ensuring a smooth process. I would also say that part of the city process that we have to go through to rezone the land and to approve a site includes requirements to engage the neighbors as well. So we do plan on that being probably a pretty heavy focus, at least earlier on in the project as we're developing it.
Probably have time for one, maybe two more questions. So if you're holding on to one, don't hold on much longer. Anybody else?
So if we sell the land, expecting a developer to put on affordable housing, and then they hold it for however long, then they decide, that's not economical, I can't make any money there, I'm going to do what I want to do. And then they just do whatever they want to do. Is that one of our concerns that we need to worry about?
Yeah, great question, Blake. The question is, if we find a developer, we do our due diligence, we really like them, they come in, they build the thing, a few years later, they're not making ends meet, and they just have to, for their own survivability, change it from affordable housing to it's just market price housing. Is that a potential outcome? What might happen there? Amanda, this might be a kick to you question, unless there's somebody else who also wants to jump in, but you want to get us rolling?
I might ask Linnea to jump in and help me on this too. I think earlier you heard Zach and Linnea and maybe Cody talk about deed restrictions, and that would be one mechanism we could use to ensure that the land is used for affordable housing. There are other mechanisms you can build into property sales to ensure that as well. One of the recent state legislations that came down last year, went into effect, was called a right of first refusal. It's geared more towards affordable housing that's already built, but it is still a mechanism that you can build into purchase and sale agreements, saying that if you don't build on this land, Discovery Church has right to buy it back from, like first right to buy it back from you, or BHA could buy it back, either way, so that we're ensuring long-term that no matter what happens over there, that parcel will end up with affordable housing as a main use.
Yeah, that's where I would exactly answer just the way that you answered. I'd also say that I just lost my thought, but I think that depending on when this determination where we realize that, like, hey, this developer isn't going the way that we had agreed or discussed, the sale of the lot will be at the very, very end of really confirming that they have their tax credits in place, all their financing is ready to go. So again, that sale of the land is going to be at the more of the tail end, right before they start to like dig a hole and start building buildings. So there's time to really determine, and my guess is we have 7 or 8 of us that can really see the character. Hopefully we can understand the character of this group in the 1.5 year, relationship. So we'll see the signs, whether they're good or bad, before then and make action. The other thing I was going to say is with this idea of selling the land as being the most straightforward direction, one of the conversations, which isn't the straightforward direction, is to try to see how our organization can have some level of agency and perhaps like minor ownership of some part of the project throughout the entire process, so that we can really have a say during kind of the short-term period of development to make sure that it really reaches the idea that we want, that we're talking about today. That's a much more complicated and challenging goal to achieve. It's easy to say than to do. The easiest thing to do would be to sell the land, but this is part of all of our conversations every month.
Yeah, and I would just add one more, taking that like an extra step further, just reassurances around once something is built over there, how does it remain affordable? How do we know in perpetuity that that's how it's going to be managed? And there's a lot of, with affordable housing and with all the tax credits and the grant funding that comes down, there's a lot of regulation that comes with that. There's a lot of oversight. The city itself has a 40-year affordability period that they build into their agreements when you go through the site planning process. The State Housing Finance Authority has a minimum 30 years that are tied specifically to those tax credits. And then other state and federal sources are going to have the similar affordability periods. One of the ways that another mechanism for maintaining long-term affordability is typically local housing authorities have what Linnea was talking about, a tiny bit of ownership in these projects. They're brought in to serve as what's called a special limited partner. And that special limited partnership allows the project to be built without sales tax. It allows the property to operate without property tax into the future, keeping those rents lower for residents. And so part of a housing authority, part of the reason a housing authority would do this, offer that those tax exemptions to a project, is so that we can make sure in perpetuity that that site will be affordable.
We have time for one more if there's anybody else. Yeah, Kath. Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. Question is, going back to the parking situation, essentially, is that going to be enough? And how much is that going to cost us? And I think the main concern, Kathy, is some people have left the church because they get here on a Sunday and they're like, there's nowhere to go. I'm going back home. I mean, there's been different iterations of leading this as a church. Do you feel like you can speak to that in question?
Yeah, sure, Kathy. I think that is one thing that we're always talking about, both on the land use committee, but also when we were talking about the silo project and when we're talking about anything here at Discovery. I think parking has a huge correlation to what things you can afford to offer to our congregation, but also the amount of people that we can serve. There is I know many of us saw this right before COVID. We were getting so big that, the classrooms were filling up, the parking lots were full, all those kind of things. So I think there was a huge push to really get this additional parking planned out. And I think COVID changed our minds in many ways. but I think it changed our mind, and maybe parking isn't the highest priority right now. And I think one thing, and I think Linnea mentioned this a little earlier, is that we're talking probably a couple of years at minimum before this project would even start construction. So I think sometimes we don't say that, but us in the kind of development world, that's normal for us, that it will take years before this actually comes to fruition. So I would say, one, we won't be losing our gravel parking lot for a while. And I think then that leads into, if we are saving X amount on our, current, if we sell the parcel, would we be saving enough to be able to fund a future parking lot? And I think that's something we would have to be doing along with the elder board of like, what is that threshold of, yes, we do need additional parking. And I would say, maybe we don't need I think there's close to 100 parking spaces in that western lot, if I remember right. I don't remember the numbers. So I would say, maybe you don't build all 100. Maybe we say 50 is what we need right now. Or we say, we'll do 50 this year, and maybe in the future, we allow for another 50 when we can afford it. And I think that is one nice thing about parking, is that you don't have to do it all at once. It's not like we have to build a foundation and build a building on top of it and then do all the things. I think it lets us step into that. And I think one of the things that I think Kathy asked is charging for parking. Technically, they're not charging us for parking. They're essentially saying, Discovery, you need to tell us how many parking stalls you have or you need based on your use of your property. And so they would probably be looking for what they call a traffic report or a traffic demand management plan of, you need additional parking stalls. That's what that report would probably say. And then as part of your development review, that's where they extract permitting fees for what you're building. So just for added clarity, it's not like Broomfield doesn't say, for every space you must pay $10,000. That's not quite the way it works, but they do extract a fee for the development of future parking lots. And then we have to also accommodate that in the pond or, storm sewer. There's lots of considerations that are costly, not just the pavement itself. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I want to honor our time, and we'll wrap up this time. If there's lingering questions, if you're like, I have a question for a particular individual on the panel, know that they have agreed to stay for the hour, which is right now. But if you want to email them, you can actually email through me, and I can disseminate out from them from there. But I just want to one more time, Linnea and I mentioned this a month ago when we kicked all this off, but the amount of time that these folks have spent pouring into drawings like this, to the work that's behind them, the expertise that is sitting in front of you in all of this stuff is remarkable. And so I think on behalf of Discovery, which I know is also you guys, but thank you for volunteering to do this particular work and for the things that are coming out of it, and particularly for the expertise and the professionalism. The experience is just mind-blowingly cool that this is who we have leading this project. So let me wrap us with a prayer, and then we can go see if the Broncos beat the Eagles. Let's pray. God, again, there are so many moving pieces with a project like this. And so as a church, and particularly as we get into more of what is next, let us not get so caught up in the details that we lose the why, and that this is a service to our Broomfield city and county, and that this is a service to people who are in need. And this is good news to the poor. And so in the ways where we can, again, do this with high creativity, and with the folks that we will need to meet and move, we're depending on you and you alone. Thanks for the privilege of having land like this that we can even dare to dream about stuff, and we need you. Thanks for this time. Thanks for these folks who would choose to stick around and ask questions and care about not just the project, but the people that will be involved in it long term. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right. Thanks, y'all. Glad you could hang around.